Now, what else will they pick on within this NASD rule? So that's a couple of questions potentially in there. Hard to say which ones for sure that you will have. If a fund has no 12b-1 fee, so within this rule, they call it an asset-based sales charge, which I actually really like because ultimately that is what a 12b-1 fee is. So when I say 12b-1 fee, this is under SEC rules. Asset-based sales charge is what FINRA actually calls it, which is really a much better description of what it is. So if the fund has no 12b-1 fee but does charge a service fee. Now, a service fee is defined as payments made by an investment company for personal service and or the maintenance of the shareholder account. So maybe it's a $20 annual fee. Then the maximum sales charge allowed is 7.25. So if a fund has a service fee, but no 12b-1 fee, then the maximum sales charge allowed 7.25, 7.25. The opposite is also true. If a fund has a 12b-1 fee, but no service fee, the maximum sales charge allowed is 7.25. So at least those together make sense. So if they charge a service fee, no 12b-1 fee, 7.25. If they charge a 12b-1 fee but no service fee, same rule, maximum sales charge 7.25. What about this? If the fund has a asset-based sales charge, which we said is called a 12b-1 fee, 12b-1 fee, and a service fee, then the maximum sales charge allowed is 6.25, 6.25. So the test just likes all of these minute details. So maybe practice making that chart, working with it, working through the section quiz questions will really help you to make sure that you know all of these various numbers. So if they have a load and a 12b-1 fee and a service fee, what's the maximum load that they can charge? 6.25. It's also true that the fund is prohibited from calling itself a no load if it has a front-end load. It's not a no load. If it has a contingent deferred sales charge, which we also call a back-end load, then it cannot call itself a no load. Or if they have a asset-based sales charge or a service fee that is more than 0.25% of net assets per year, then they cannot call themselves a no load. So if the 12b-1 fee and or service fees are more than 0.25%, then they can't claim to be, they cannot advertise themselves. They are not, in fact, a no load. So I would certainly know that. So this has to do more than 0.25% of net assets. of net assets. So this 12B1 fee is an asset-based sales charge. So I don't care what it is as a percentage of operating expenses. We care what it is as a percentage of net assets. In connection with the execution of investment company portfolio transactions, so all mutual funds must execute the purchases and sales of the securities in the portfolio through a broker-dealer. No member firm shall favor or disfavor the sales of shares of any particular investment company on the basis of brokerage commissions received from the investment company. So let's say the mutual fund company A funnels their transactions through brokerage firm B. They can't tell all of their reps to only sell mutual fund company A because we love their business. No, they can't do that. No member firm shall act as an underwriter for an investment company if the member knows that the investment company is expected to direct portfolio securities transactions to a broker or dealer in consideration for the sale of shares issued by the company, and no member shall demand or require brokerage commissions from any source as a condition to the sale or distribution of shares of an investment company. Further, no member shall, with respect to such members' retail sales or distribution of investment company shares, provide to sales personnel any additional compensation for the sale of shares of specific investment companies based upon the amount of brokerage commissions received from any source, recommend specific investment companies to sales personnel on the basis of brokerage commissions received from any source, grant to sales personnel any participation in brokerage commissions received by such member from portfolio transactions of an investment company whose shares are sold by the member, use the sales of shares of an investment company as a factor in negotiating the price of or the amount of brokerage commission to be paid on the portfolio transactions of an investment company or of any covered account, whether such transaction is executed in the over-the-counter market or elsewhere. A covered account is defined as any other investment company or other account managed by the investment advisor of such investment company or any other account from which brokerage commissions are received or expected as a result of the request of the principal underwriter of such investment company or of any affiliated person. So this idea, you can never favor or disfavor investment company shares based upon expected commissions, brokerage commissions, never. FINRA has additional rules regarding the prompt payment for investment company shares. Member firms are required, including underwriters, when they engage in direct retail transactions for investment company shares, to transmit payments received from customers for such shares, which such members have sold to customers, to investment companies by. So we'll make a chart here to make sure that we don't get confused. So there's this idea that the client paid money for investment company shares to the member. When does the money have to be forwarded on to the investment company? So it really depends. Of course, this whole section seems to depend upon something. So if the customer orders and pays for shares, let's say on Monday. So let's say Monday, the client placed their order and paid for shares. Now we know regular way settlement is T+3, so that concept helps us with this question. So if the client ordered and paid for shares on Monday, the rule says that the member shall forward the money to the investment company by the end of the third business day following a receipt of a customer's order to purchase, okay, or by the end of one business day following the receipt of a customer's payment for such shares, whichever is the later date. So since we have the order and the payment occurring on the same day, so Monday in my example, we either have till the next day, so the business day after the receipt of payment, or the end of the third business day following the order, whichever is longer. So this is the order, and we have payment. So Monday, Tuesday would be under one rule, or Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Oh, we have until Thursday. So the end of the third day after the order, or the day after receipt of payment, whichever is longer. So let me give you a different example. So what if they placed the order on Monday but didn't pay until Thursday? So Monday they place the order. So it's Monday plus 3. But what if they paid on Thursday? So on Thursday, because in reality they've got, under Federal Reserve Regulation T, 5 days to pay. So let's say on the Thursday they paid. Then this rule that says the next business day, Friday, you would have to send the money to the investment company. So the end of the third business day following a receipt of a customer's order, or the end of one business day following receipt of a customer's payment for such shares, whichever is later. So just carefully read the question. I always try to draw out some charts, those help me. Member firms that are underwriters and that engage in wholesale transactions for investment company shares shall transmit payment for investment company shares, which such members have received from other members, to investment company issuers by the end of 2 business days following receipt of such payments. So the first rule that we just did on the board is when we have received money from customers. Now we've received money from another member firm. Then we have 2 business days following the receipt of such payments to forward it on. If a transaction involves the purchase of shares of an investment company that imposes a deferred sales charge upon sales redemption, the member's written confirmation to the customer shall include the following legend. On selling your shares, you may pay a sales charge. For the charge and other fees, see the prospectus. So anytime your client buys, generally speaking, Class B shares have a contingent deferred sales charge. This legend shall appear on the confirmation in at least 8-point type. In connection with the sale and distribution of investment company securities, no associated person of a member shall accept any compensation from anyone other than the member with which the person is associated. However, this requirement will not prohibit arrangements where a non-member company pays compensation directly to associated persons of the member, provided that the arrangement is agreed to by the member. Any compensation is treated as compensation received by the member firm. Compensation is not in the form of securities of any kind, and the member keeps proper records of all compensation received. Further, no member shall accept any cash compensation from an offerer unless such compensation is described in a current prospectus of the investment company. No member or person associated with a member shall accept any non-cash compensation. We talked about this idea that there are certain situations in which we are allowed to receive some money. So we talked about this under FINRA's variable contract rules, FINRA Rule 2320. But it's the same exact information that comes up again, but now it's under the rule as it relates to investment company securities. So it's sort of repetitive. It's the same information, but it applies to both. So the following gifts are allowable. Gifts that do not exceed how much per person per year? $100, an occasional meal, ticket to a sporting event or to the theater, or comparable entertainment, which is not so frequent as to be questionable. It's not preconditioned on achievement of a sales target. They can reimburse for your training, your education. Proper records must be kept. It's not preconditioned upon achievement of a sales target. The location is somewhere close by. We do not pay for the expenses of a guest. So same rule as before, but as it relates to investment companies instead of variable products. Same rule as before as far as the sales contest rules. Non-cash compensation arrangements between a member and its associated persons, or a non-member company and its sales personnel who are associated persons of an affiliated member, are also permitted, provided that the compensation arrangement, if it includes investment company securities, is based upon, what did we say? Total production of associated persons with respect to all investment companies' securities distributed by the member. The non-cash compensation arrangement requires that the credit received for each investment company security is equally weighted. No unaffiliated member may participate. Proper records must be kept. So once again, sales contest rules as they relate to investment company shares. So sometimes the test will ask about, are these allowable? Yes, if these rules are followed. So whether or not it's a proprietary fund, we can't just recommend that. We can't have a contest just based upon that. Or it's that it's a favorite variable life insurance policy. We can't favor any of them. It's not allowed. FINRA Rule 2090. It's called Know Your Customer. Seems like a good thing to do. FINRA Rule 2090, relatively new. Know your customer. Every member shall use reasonable diligence in regard to the opening and maintenance of every account, to know and retain the essential facts concerning every customer and concerning the authority of each person acting on behalf of such customer. Generally, FINRA Rule 2090 is modeled after former NYSE Rule 405 and requires firms to use reasonable diligence in regard to the opening and maintenance of every account. A broker-dealer must know its customers not only at account opening, but also throughout the life of its relationship with customers in order to, among other things, effectively service and supervise the customer accounts. Since a broker-dealer's relationship with its customers is dynamic, FINRA does not believe that it can prescribe a period within which broker-dealers must attempt to update this information. So there's no must be updated every X number of months or days or years or anything like that. It might need to be updated more frequently for certain types of clients than other types of clients. It all depends upon what the firm does. As with the customer's investment profile that we're going to learn about momentarily under what's called FINRA Rule 2111, the suitability rule, a firm should verify the essential facts about a customer under the Know Your Customer rule at regular intervals. That's lawyerly, reasonably calculated, to prevent and detect any mishandling of a customer's account that might result from the customer's change in circumstances. The reasonableness of a broker-dealer's efforts in this regard will depend upon the facts and circumstances of each particular case. So there's some buzzwords that they like here. Essential facts. Essential facts. So we'll talk about what those are. Regular intervals. Regular intervals. Update at regular intervals. But FINRA's not going to tell you when. They're not going to give you a specific period of time. Now, it's important to remember that the Securities Exchange Act has a rule. It's called 17A-3. Requires broker-dealers to, among other things, attempt to update certain account information every 36 months regarding accounts for which the broker-dealers are required to make suitability determinations. So there is this possible discrepancy, if you will, between a question about the Securities Exchange Act, how often must you update customer account information, no less frequently than every 36 months. Okay, so that's under one rule. Whereas essential facts concerning a customer under FINRA's Know Your Customer 2090 rule must be updated at regular intervals. Okay, so two different answers depending upon how the question is worded. What are the essential facts? The essential facts are those required to effectively service the customer's account, act in accordance with any special handling instructions on the account, understand the authority of each person acting on behalf of the customer, comply with applicable laws, regulations, and rules. So essential facts allow the firm to do that. FINRA Rule 2090 requires that a member firm know the names of any persons authorized to act on behalf of a customer and any limits on their authority that the customer establishes and communicates to the member firm. It is important to note that the Know Your Customer obligation arises at the beginning of a customer-broker-dealer relationship and does not depend upon whether the broker has made a recommendation. It has nothing to do with if a recommendation has been made. So the triggering event for knowing your customer is when they become the firm's customer. So at the beginning of the relationship. So when they become your customer, that's when the firm is first required to know the essential facts and update them at regular intervals. What does have to do with whether or not the firm has made a recommendation or not is the suitability rule. So the triggering effect for this suitability rule is going to be a recommendation. So FINRA Rule 2111, also pretty new. Someday these will all be old. FINRA Rule 2111. Suitability. It's a pretty big one. It's going to be a pretty large emphasis on your test. I would assume always it's such an important rule to make sure that your registered reps are following it. FINRA's suitability rule applies to a broker-dealer's or registered representative's recommendation of a security or investment strategy involving a security to a customer. So the triggering effect. The trigger for the suitability rule to apply is whether or not the firm or a registered rep of the firm has made to the client a recommendation. So that's the difference between the Know Your Customer rule, which begins at the time the customer relationship is established, and whether or not the suitability rule applies. So if the broker-dealer or registered rep has made a recommendation that a client buy a security or follow an investment strategy, then the suitability rule applies. For the purposes of FINRA's suitability rule, the term customer includes a person who is not a broker or dealer, who opens a brokerage account at a broker-dealer, or purchases a security for which the broker-dealer receives or will receive, direct or indirectly, compensation. This rule requires that a firm or associated person have a reasonable basis to believe that a recommended transaction or investment strategy involving a security or securities is suitable for the customer based upon information obtained through the reasonable diligence of the member or associated person to ascertain the customer's investment profile. So recommendation is the trigger, reason to believe that the recommendation is suitable, based upon the client's investment profile, So what a customer's investment profile includes, but of course is never limited to, the customer's age, other investments, financial situation and needs, tax status, investment objective, investment experience, investment time horizon, liquidity needs, risk tolerance, and any other information the customer may disclose to the member or associated person in connection with such recommendation. I'm not going to write all those down for you, but I'm going to say them again because they are so important. Investment profile includes age, other investments, financial situation and needs, tax status, investment objective, investment experience, time horizon, liquidity needs, risk tolerance, and any other information that they've told you. So it's quite very broad. Liquidity needs. Liquidity needs has to do with the extent to which a customer desires the ability or has financial obligations that dictate the need to quickly and easily convert to cash all or a portion of the investment or investments without experiencing significant loss in value from, for example, the lack of a ready market or incurring significant costs or penalties. Annuities, not liquid. They have all of those surrender charges built into the beginning years. Direct participation programs, there's no secondary market. Those are not liquid either. So it's one of the things that is part of your client's investment profile. Liquid investments include money market funds, treasury bills, many blue chip stocks. They're actively traded. Blue chips tend to have a sideways market price. That's a consolidation pattern. Exchange traded funds. They trade in the secondary market like a stock. And mutual funds. So very liquid investments. A high level of liquidity does not, in and of itself, mean that the recommended product is suitable for all customers. For instance, some relatively liquid products can be complex and or risky and therefore unsuitable for some customers, like leveraged and inverse exchange-traded funds. So some exchange-traded funds are incredibly complicated. Time horizon, what is that? It's the expected number of months, years, or decades that a customer plans to invest to achieve a particular financial goal. Time horizon. So if somebody's planning for retirement, how old are they? To determine their time horizon. Risk tolerance. This is the most subjective thing that you'll ever try to measure. There's usually some sort of quiz your firm has put together that you give a customer. But just the basic concept of it, the customer's ability and willingness to lose some or all of the original investment in exchange for greater potential returns. So those are just some definitions that are possibly new to you. Probably not entirely new to you. But because FINRA has classified certain things as being liquid, I wanted to make sure to include those for you. Not every factor regarding a customer's investment profile will be relevant to every recommendation, so the rule does provide flexibility concerning the type of information that firms must seek to obtain and analyze. The factors that we've discussed are generally relevant, often crucial to a suitability analysis. So the rule says that if a firm doesn't receive all of that information about a client, so all of those things that I discussed as far as what is your client's investment profile, then they have to have the ability to document with specificity their reasonable basis for believing that a factor is not relevant in order to be relieved of the obligation to seek information about that factor. So if they don't want to ask about somebody's age, they must say, why do they think their age doesn't matter? Their age should matter, would matter always, I would think. The triggering event for the application of the FINRA suitability rule is what? Recommendation, I heard you. The suitability rule would apply when a broker, dealer, or registered representative makes a recommendation to a customer. The suitability rule would also apply when a broker-dealer or registered rep makes a recommendation to a potential investor who then becomes a customer by executing the transaction through the broker-dealer with which the registered rep is associated, or the broker-dealer receives indirectly or directly compensation as a result of the recommended transaction. The suitability rule does not apply to a recommendation made to a potential investor who does not act on the recommendation or executes the transaction away from the broker-dealer with which the registered representative is associated without the broker-dealer receiving compensation for the transaction. So sometimes that happens. A registered rep recommends something and then the customer goes and does it with another firm. The suitability rule would not apply to the original recommendation made. That's what that's saying. The determination of the existence of a recommendation has always been based on the facts and circumstances of the particular case. There are, however, several guiding principles that are relevant to determining whether a particular communication could be viewed as a recommendation for purposes of the suitability rule. For instance, a communication's content, context, and presentation are important aspects of the inquiry. The determination of whether or not a recommendation has been made is an objective rather than a subjective inquiry. A broker-dealer cannot avoid suitability obligations through a disclaimer where, given its context, content, and presentation, the particular communication would be viewed as a recommendation. They can't just say at the bottom, this is not a recommendation, where everything else about it says that it is a recommendation. FINRA Rule 2111 explicitly states that a firm or associated person cannot disclaim any reasonability under the suitability rule. A broker's recommendations must be consistent with his customer's best interest and are not suitable merely because the customer acquiesces to them, which is an important factor. A lot of times the customer they don't know, so they default and say yes. They don't always understand what is being recommended to them. So just the agreement to engage in a particular strategy or purchase a specific security does not mean that it is suitable for the client.